blah, blah.
Yes, we have to read it every time. That's why I tried to make it kind of short.
Good. Okay. Well, then before we officially get started, I will say that in accordance with Utah Code Section 52-4-207, subsection 4 of the Utah Open and Public Meeting Act, I have determined that conducting an electronic meeting of the Centerville Planning Commission with an anchor presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based on the facts and circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. Considering the continued number of COVID-19 case counts in Utah, meeting in an anchor location presents substantial risk to the health and safety of those in attendance because physical distancing measures may be difficult to maintain at City Hall. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and we'll state the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. Okay, so hey, Leah, can you enable participant screen sharing for me for just a second? Because I realized that with this format that we have, I have an interesting opportunity to not only give a thought, but I can also show some pictures. And so, can everybody see my screen? Okay. On September 8th, we experienced what I have heard described as a once in a 40-year storm. And a bunch of folks had shared that belonged to a Centerville group had shared on Facebook pictures of some of the things that happened in our city. We lost quite a few trees. I would love to get a count at the end of when all of this is done to find out how many trees we lost. We lost fences. Some of these were just crazy. Yeah, I've seen trees land on houses. So according to the Salt Lake Tribune, there were gusts that were reached at least 99 miles per hour that were recorded, with the worst winds concentrated north of Salt Lake County, according to the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service clocked 99 miles per hour at Park Lane on US Highway 89 and gusts of 97 miles per hour in Farmington. Winds with 74 miles per hour or faster are classified as hurricane force winds, according to the National Hurricane Center. So I guess given that it's 2020, it makes sense that we had a hurricane, right? It left 170,000 people without power. And as some of the commissioners were talking just before our meeting started, some power has still not been restored. After assessing some of the damage in Centerville, following the severe winds that impacted neighborhoods across the Wasatch Front, Governor Herbert, he said the following on September 9th. After assessing some of the damage in Centerville and other locations, quote, I am reminded of the resilient spirit of Utahns. Just like the many generations which came before us, no amount of hardship can diminish our inherent sense of duty to our communities. This determined spirit of those affected by the storm has been nothing short of astounding. Countless individuals have taken it upon themselves to help their friends and neighbors, going above and beyond to ensure their well-being. Overcoming these types of events is always easier when we do so together. I also want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the numerous maintenance crews who are working tirelessly to ensure power is restored, roadways are safe to travel on, and the damage is dealt with. We could not effectively recover from the storm without their experience, skill, and dedication. The past several months have been filled with immense trials and challenges beyond the ordinary. With every disaster that we face, I am continually grateful to be part of a state whose people consistently puts others' needs first and are selfless in their service. The Utah way is founded upon the principle of conquering the road less traveled, and I know that we can do so yet again. I couldn't say it any better. So I plagiarized Governor Herbert, giving him credit. There were so many photos that were posted. There were hundreds of photos that were posted, and I wish that I could have pulled them all out. But I just want to say thank you to everybody. I mean, this is a community. I love Centerville so much because of the community that we have here. I mean, neighbors were out helping immediately after the storm was done. Neighbors in my neighborhood were helping haul stuff. You have our fantastic public works people, our mayor, our police department. I mean, it makes me really excited that I can live in such a wonderful community. So anyway, that was my thought. See, something about the pandemic is not necessarily awful. We get to see pictures, pictures in this format. So anyway, I hope everyone is recovering okay, and it's a great community. I'm proud to be part of this community. Okay, with that, we have 2 items of commission business. The first is the administrative decision for Bank of America. So the applicant is resubmitting the proposed colors and materials storyboard scheme as required by condition 8 of the final site plan approval. So I will turn the time over to staff.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Thank you, Chair Heyman, and the commission members. I know this is unusual to meet on a Monday, and appreciate those who were able to accommodate their schedule. I think hopefully Orlando, the applicant for Bank of America, can maybe discuss some of their details. They would like to go to the RDA tomorrow night. So that was kind of the impetus of the request to try to meet tonight, is at least be able to move them forward to talk with the RDA. Just as a reminder, the final site plan for Bank of America was approved. There was a final condition, I think it was number 8, where prior to building permit, the colors and materials were to return back to the Planning Commission for approval. Again, I indicated they plan on going to the RDA tomorrow night and achieving the approval of the RDA for their architectural requirements also. So they would like you to discuss with that. In summary, there was a lot of discussion about the gray material and the tone and saturation of that color. What you'll see in your packet, I've got on the board, this is their proposed alternative. They tried to color correct for printing purposes the original architectural elements. I think they've lightened up some of the tone. I believe some of the rock design has changed to a different material, but maybe give Orlando a chance to respond to what they made the changes, and then the commission can debate on the colors and materials storyboard and see if you can achieve a consensus, at least as a majority. So unless you have questions, I'll turn it over to you, Chair Heyman, to talk with the applicant.
Does anyone have any questions for staff before we invite the applicant to join us? Nope, seeing no comments, then we'll go ahead and invite the applicant to join us.
Well, good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Well, great. Well, thanks again for allowing us to the opportunity to present the Bank of America color storyboard in front of you. And it's glad to hear that you guys are all doing well, given the circumstances of the inclement weather that you guys encountered last week. What you see in front of you is a modification to the previously requested gray color tones. The silver chain is a lighter color from previously presented, along with the white elm stone cladding to kind of take in consideration the request. And I think with these colors, I think we've had the opportunity to stay within the harmonious surroundings with this effort. We did clean up the original grayer tones. But Corey, I don't know if that one was in their packet or not, but this is the lighter version. So that's the true representation of the one that we've submitted, and this is the one that we wanted to get you guys' buy-in on, and making it more true to the realistic charcoal slate. As you can see, the asphalt pavement has been adjusted. The concrete sidewalk has been adjusted. We've added some surrounding foliage to kind of give kind of a representation of the area, so that you can truly see the contrasting efforts that we've put forth with this design.
And so which design are you proposing? Is
Well,
it either or?
Well, we took the first request that there were some concerns that the rendering that we originally proposed didn't clearly represent the colors as well. So we took that approach, and we re-rendered it and casted the sun and the shadows a little differently to give a more true representation of what you guys saw last week. And hopefully this one could satisfy some of the concerns initially with the colors not being true to what they truly are. So we would propose the charcoal slate for consideration, is what the request is.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Oh, seeing none, thank you. We really appreciate it. We'll invite you to unconnect with us. We'll just close out your video there for both of you. Okay, well, any further questions for staff? And Mr. Malmberg will ask you to go ahead and just mute your video as well, please. Thank you. All right, I'll open it up for discussion.
I did not have the benefit of being at this meeting, and so maybe some context from my fellow commissioners might be helpful in understanding. I've read through the notes a little bit. When I look back at at least the agenda packet from the colors, the silver chain it looks like it was a previous color versus what is being proposed now. The charcoal color. I like the lighter color personally better, but you know, I don't.
The charcoal is the original, and then the lighter version is the alternative.
Okay, so that's good then. If that's the alternative, my preference is the alternative. So again, I'd be interested to hear just a brief summary of, fellow commissioners, why they didn't like that, other than it was too dark.
Yeah, and let me give some context to this, Spencer. So the issue that we have to determine is whether the color palette is harmonious with the existing surrounding development. One of the concerns that was raised was that in the packet that was given to us before, there were little tiny swatches of color on the bottom, but it wasn't truly represented when you looked at it in the larger picture, that the colors didn't quite match up. And there was also concern expressed that by myself personally, that the gray didn't match the surrounding tan overtones of the other buildings. Like think the existing Iggy's, think the Dennis building that's right next to it, think the In-N-Out building across the street. And if you look up Parish Lane, the Chili's and where the Sonic used to be, all of those buildings there are more of a tan color, not the gray.
Or the brown earth tones.
The brown, yes, brown earth tones rather than gray tones.
My input is I like the revision, so that's as simple as that.
I'll go. I think that the original, the charcoal slate, definitely the last time we saw this, it looked very dark, and I could see where the concern was coming from. And so the re-rendering, casting some actual sunlight on it, and looks, looks much lighter. And I'm not sure that. Anyway, I didn't really have a significant issue with it before. The charcoal slate is much lighter than what it was represented for before. I have less of an issue with it, but I honestly don't have strong feelings either way. I think both of them are fine, and both of them will work. So that's all I have to say.
I agree. I kind of like the darker though. It gives a little more contrast. The other one kind of seems all just kind of washed out. Kind of there's no anything. Yeah, that one, I don't like that one. They're just all kind of, I like the different contrast, but either one is fine with me. I'm good with either.
Well, I'm going to weigh in because I was fairly opinionated during the last hearing. I still don't love that much white on that building. And I say that because we had such an intensive discussion when we were looking at the gas station just up the street, and we didn't want to allow them to have that much white. And this is twice as much white. It's the one that we said no to. And we said no to the other one because we didn't think that it was harmonious. So I mean, as between the two colors, which one do I think is harmonious with that? We'll butt it up right next to the children's dentistry building. I prefer the lighter version as between the two. I still question whether gray is the right color.
So just to play devil's advocate with you there, then if white is the concern, silver is pretty close to white, and then white elm is the stone on that lighter tone versus the southern peak, which seems to be a less white stone, and then it's charcoal slate. So it's all altogether less white on the original one versus the lighter one.
Just from this rendering, the tan, the lighter gray looks a little more tan to me than the charcoal slate, which definitely looks gray. Who haven't we heard from? Mason?
Yeah.
Hey, Christina.
I'm pretty ambivalent about either color scheme. I think they both are close enough.
Well, we don't have a proposed motion in our packet. Anyone want to take a stab at a motion? Or further discussion? I'm not trying to cut off discussion prematurely.
I can make a motion.
Go ahead, Spencer.
I'll try my best. This is my first time making a motion. So Kevin, Shaylin, Christina, Mason, you can correct me. But I'd make a motion that the Planning Commission approve the color scheme using the silver chain stucco paint scheme option 1 as presented in the meeting agenda packet.
And I will second that. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? With that, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Summerhays.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
And I'm a nay. But you didn't need me. You had 4 out of 5. So, yeah. What am I missing?
Yeah.
Oh, it was just 4. Yeah. So, all right. I'm outvoted. But we do appreciate the applicant for coming back and addressing our concerns. So,
And yet you seconded the motion, Shaylin.
I did.
So we could discuss it.
Yeah.
Well, we could discuss it. We call it the Logan option here.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay, so with that, then Corey, does staff need anything else from us so that Bank of America can move forward with their building?
No, you've approved the alternative scheme, which is the lighter scheme. And so that'll be the scheme that gets forwarded to the RDA tomorrow night.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda, this is scheduled for a discussion only. So this is the transportation element discussion. And I'll turn the time back over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Heyman and members of the commission. Just to kind of bring you up to brief speed. Over the decade and a half or more, the state has been heavily involved in our Land Use Management Act, involving our general plan and the moderate income housing needs of the state. And over the last 15 years, there's been some minor or some major modifications to that legislation for the city's general plan. And the cities now have to report to the Department of Workforce Services on an annual basis on our efforts to comply with the moderate income housing elements that has been adopted, requirements by the state, and then the elements been adopted by the city. As some of you recall, last year we did update our moderate income housing element to comply with the Senate Bill 34 of 2 legislative sessions ago. That had to be done by December 1st of 2019. As part of that bill, we were also required for December 1st of 2020 to take a look at our transportation element. And there are some specific requirements of cities to look at in their transportation element plan. And it a lot centers around transportation investments. So if you think of things like the Front Runner is a great example of a large transportation investment. If you think of Provo and the bus rapid transit through the Provo-Orem communities as a major transportation enhancement. Cities are supposed to amend their transportation element to essentially correlate those major transportation projects into their general plan for the city. And so they passed that requirement of the cities that if you have that major transportation project within your community, you need to take into account of that as part of your transportation element and your moderate income housing needs for the future. However, staff has taken the position that we don't have a major transportation element, meaning we do have Front Runner going through, but we do not have a station stop. So at this point, we don't have a major transportation element as part of our community. And the bill that's passed says, okay, if you don't have a transportation investment in your community, you need to at least go to your transportation element and start correlating your needs of future population with your transportation plan to kind of set that vision for the future. So what I've done in the staff report, I'll share it with you. I've kind of tried to outline the best I can all these details and then giving you the links to the Utah code and so forth. But when we look at, here's the position we took. You know, we're required to take our residential and commercial development areas that will maintain and improve connections between housing, transportation, employment, education, recreation, and commerce. A big, broad spectrum to try to look at. And so it mainly centers around this concept that you need to plan for your moderate income housing. Compare your moderate income housing in your plan and look at your transportation element and start finding a correlation. Do some correlation between those two documents. And so that's kind of what I want you to kind of focus on is we're not trying to solve moderate income housing at this point. The intent's not to solve our moderate income housing. We're supposed to, as a city, take reasonable efforts in our planning of our communities and our zoning districts to try to achieve a reasonable possibility for future moderate income housing. And I take a little bit of a negative view of the state legislation, so I'm just going to give you my bias a little bit. I think it's a little short-sighted for the legislator to solely attack municipalities in trying to achieve moderate income housing. Now, granted, I think they have some basis for that push. If you go to places like West Haven in Weber County, they zone for 1 and 5 acre lots. And they don't want anything less than 1 acre lots in their community originally. And I think that was a use of zoning that was trying to push out alternative housing types. It pushed it to large lot development, large lot single family, and did not provide some alternatives. So I think the state had some merit in saying, hey, cities, look at your zoning and be sure that you're not zoning opportunities out. But I think the impetus of late is that there's this effort by the state legislation to make cities feel like they're responsible solely for the moderate income housing needs of their community. And I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. An example is in Centerville City, we've developed, probably compared to our housing units, I think we're just over 500 or 5,000 residential units of single family in the city. And we have nearly 900 units of multifamily. And if you look at an open housing market, for our community size, we have a lot of multifamily housing. And when you look at the rent rates of that multifamily housing, it's still running anywhere from $1,100 to $1,400 a month for multifamily housing in Centerville. We don't control those rent rates. And so I've always taken the position that we could build as many multifamily housing as we wanted, and the demand of housing is so high still that rent rates won't drop to the necessary level. In 2017, rents couldn't exceed more than $750 a month. So if you look at our community, it is going to be a rare find that zoning for multifamily densities is going to produce rent rates at $750, $800 a month. And that's where my complaint is with the state, is that not every community can zone the density high enough to get rent rates down to a moderate income level. And so if you look at what we've done in our moderate income housing, I just pulled some quick tables to you. We've made some advancements with our multifamily housing for the 80% AMI. We're doing fairly okay compared to other cities for the 80% AMI, given the number of multifamily we've produced in the last 10 years. As you look at the 50% AMI and 30% AMI, that's where you see the devastation in our community. And so if you're looking at rent rates at $750 a month or $800 a month for 80% of AMI, you can imagine that the rent rates need to drop to below 500 for 30% AMI and 50% AMI. And so I think just taking cities and making them zone for densities, and that's being an overzealous statement on the state legislation part. But if you look at our community, it's not only about zoning for multifamily. I just don't think we can achieve it in a marketplace. And so the way the city would have to do it is probably join on a county level and get with the Davis County Housing Authority and find ways to incentivize affordable housing in the concept of, as densities are applied, as multifamily is built, that some of that is directly dedicated to affordable housing. And that's the hard part of cities that our size. the effort it takes to track, monitor, and ensure that all housing is sold at a moderate income housing level for, let's say, a 10-year period would be rather difficult for a small community. Where if we joined at a county level and we started targeting the 30% AMI and using the Davis County Housing Authority, we might have a greater chance of providing housing in Davis County for those income levels. But we don't have that. So there's my soapbox. We don't have that. And to produce that is a large and expensive financial commitment and partnership with other communities, which I'm not saying we shouldn't do in the future. But really what I'm asking from the staff at this point is we do need to correlate our transportation plan to make sure that we're in compliance with state statutes. And so I went back to our moderate income housing plan and looked at some of the ideas that we have chosen as highlights. And if you look at our policies as highlights, we're not trying to zone more multifamily areas, at least this point. Our policies right here on page 3 are to, I look at the primary MIH identified strategies. Create or allow for and reduce regulations related to accessory dwelling units in residential zones. And if you've been on the commission for any length of time, we've had several discussions about accessory apartments. We spent a year in a public charrette process studying accessory dwellings. When it did land at the legislative body, it raised some concerns and it dropped from there. So we have not done anything as far as actually implementing accessory dwelling units in the city, but yet it's one of our priorities that's listed in our plan. The idea is to preserve existing moderate income housing. That's been a struggle the last few months when we've lost the manufactured home park, potentially losing that. That's just a situation of an open market for purchasing of property. But we do have some. Cedar Springs is one that we've spent money on through RDA to help preserve some moderate income housing. We've done some things with Pheasant Brook. Pheasant Brook has qualified at past times for moderate income housing. So we've helped them with some storm drainage and water improvements for their project. But that's another strategy we've picked. And then we have this caveat. Any other program or strategy, we just throw the fish net out and wonder if something's going to catch. And so those are our 3 primary for now. And so I took that focus and went back to the concept of any other strategy in this accessory dwelling units. I've tried to capitalize on those couple of strategies and said, here's some ideas. So I give you a bunch of recommendations. You know, we can look at additional housing in a single block measurement on our transportation corridors. The concept of that is if you think of our CM zone on the South Main Street corridor, there was discussions in the past to still allow accessory apartments for those commercial units. So I think that's something that correlates with our transportation. If we allowed some of those commercial properties to supplement their struggling commercial uses, because a lot of our CM zone is service sector uses, would it be helpful to maybe within a 1 block distance or half block distance of Main Street to allow some accessory apartments in that commercial zone? Again, we get back to the controversy we've had with the South Main Street corridor. You know, how many units can you have? How many will they be? What will it impact the traffic? But I still think we had some reasonable effort in our work session with the city council in the past to look at the Main Street corridor with some accessory apartments. And I think that's a good correlation. So the use of accessory apartments or accessory dwellings along corridors, I suggested. The other ideas is that we could look at our transportation corridors where we do encourage multifamily. An example is on Parish Lane. We encourage multifamily to occur within 500 feet and 1,000 feet of that corridor. If you look in the Northwest plan, the idea of the manufactured housing park, and some of those have come within 1,000-foot corridor. Could we look at some of our transportation corridors and maybe up the density a little bit? Instead of 4 units an acre in those transportation corridors, could we do an overlay for 5 units an acre? Because a lot of our residential area is developed on 5th acre lots, not quarter acre lots. So could we look at that? Could we look at our RM zone? If you recall in the past, we eliminated the 6, 7, and 8, or the 7 and 8 units per acre, have 6 units an acre permitted. But our general plan still says residential medium is 8 units an acre. So could we use some of those corridors to maybe do 7 units an acre as an overlay, and then 10 units an acre in the RH? Those are some ideas I put in. Another place I thought of is in our Old Town area. We have some lots that are underutilized. And this is the whole concept that the city originally used flag lots for infill. And then 3 years later, the city removed flag lots from infill because they didn't like the flag lot style. I still disagree with flag lots. I think they'll come back in a few more years because of these underutilized lots. It's a way to infill. But could we flex the street widths? Right now we require 60. If we had a home that was kind of compromising a 2-lot subdivision and still had 120 feet, but just not equally for setbacks for a new home, could we adjust that? Could we do a flex strategy in our Old Town where we could still meet the zoning parameters, but we could adjust the lot frontages or the setbacks for existing homes and reuse a larger parcel for another infill home? Would that produce moderate income housing? Not likely, but it's something to be looking at. The other thing I put in there is that comprehensive inclusionary zoning strategy. This is where we do maybe partner with the county and Davis Housing Authority. And when a developer comes in for 12 units an acre, if we can ever get to the idea that we like 12 units an acre instead of 8, that they dedicate 2 units per acre to moderate income housing to get to the 12. And then we coordinate that with the Davis Housing Authority to monitor and deed restrict those units. I think that's an overly complicated strategy though for Centerville at this point. So really what I step back is we have a short amount of time to correlate our transportation element. We probably have lots of work to do on moderate income housing, but we have till December 1st to do some coordination. Again, we don't have to solve the world yet, but we ought to at least coordinate it. And so I'm looking back to the accessory dwellings and the accessory apartments, maybe a small lot floating zone, maybe an infill overlay. So I chose 4 for you to discuss. And if we could pick 2 or 3 or even just 1, if it's too controversial, let's pick one of those that we put into our transportation plan and say, we're going to look along these corridors to do a couple of these opportunities. And then we fulfill the state statute and we can come back at another time next year and see how we actually implement it. So there's my piece to try to get to December 1st. Tell me what you think you would like to see as potential ideas in the transportation element to coordinate, and then I'd write them up for your review at the next meeting.
Thank you, Corey. So 4 options here, and I suppose these are not the only ones if anyone has additional ideas, but Corey, I think that you've done a good job of coming up with 4. From my perspective, it seems like the ADUs are something that the city council has expressed interest in actively doing, and maybe putting, ADUs above the businesses there along Main Street as an option. So I tended to gravitate a little bit towards that one because I thought that it might actually be feasible. But what do you guys think? I'll open it up for discussion.
Corey, what are setbacks for an ADU? Obviously, it's not the actual ADU itself. It's the structure within where it's housed within. So can you help us understand that a little bit?
Well, there's multiple ways to do an ADU. The one that did rise to the level of the council was an attached ADU. It had to be a part of the house. You couldn't do a detached. So the old ordinance that went to the city council, you couldn't build one in your backyard. It had to be a part of your house, which I personally think that that's a less likely scenario to put an ADU in your house unless you're doing it for family. I think a detached function separately and keep some independence. But currently, the ordinance that went from the Planning Commission to the City Council said your accessory dwelling had to be inside your primary home, limited in square feet to, I think, 800 square feet. And that was a controversial issue. Some people wanted it 50% of the structure. And I made the argument if it becomes 50% of the structure, it just becomes a duplex. But it was 800 square feet, part of the house, and met the setbacks of the primary building by zone. So typically in a residential, 25-foot front, 8 and 10 on sides, 20 in the rear.
Okay, stupid question probably. So does it have to be part of the house, or can it be like a detached garage?
You can do detached garages, but the last ordinance that went to the city council, that was frowned upon by the planning commission. Now we have a
Yes.
different makeup of the planning commission. So I think if we went back, we would revisit that discussion. But the ordinance that did get forward by a previous commission did not want detached accessory dwellings.
I'll throw this out to the commission that I've never been a part of the discussion related to accessory dwelling units, only insofar as I agree with Corey that from a usability and marketability standpoint, if we're trying to be proponents of accessory dwelling units, we need to be able to provide, I don't know, some kind of separate living space as an option, at least. Not that they have to be, but that it also would be something that respects the adjacent property owners in terms of height and privacy and things like that. I think if you have a small unit, maybe even less than 800 square feet is pretty small as it is, but you know, I don't know, that's my feeling is I'm okay with accessory dwelling units so long as we protect privacy of adjacent neighbors in terms of height and setbacks.
Yeah, and I think the proposal was just one story. I think that the setbacks were 6 feet on that original ordinance, but all of those can be adjusted in future discussions.
Corey, was one of the concerns that the city council had, maybe I'm totally off base, but the concern with the detached structure was that they didn't want people putting like tiny houses in their backyard.
It actually became a planning commission discussion. The council did not focus so much on the detached. The council focused on, does it change the nature of the neighborhood on who's coming and going? And the council focused on the building codes, because we have illegal accessory dwelling units in Centerville, but they're just not sanctioned. And if they had to go back and retrofit, it could be costly. And the council was trying to say, well, do we want that? So there's been a lot of movement by Council Member Fillmore with the Utah League of Cities and Towns to try to mitigate some of the building standards for accessory dwelling units. And you'll see how far that goes. But that was focus of the council. The focus of the commission is the previous commission just did not like detached units. It made them uncomfortable. And I to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure why it made them uncomfortable. They just
to throw this out to the commission members. Does anybody have an issue with small, tiny houses detached as accessory dwelling units, and maybe provide some rationale if so?
I guess we have an illegal one in our neighborhood. I don't know. We have a person with a detached garage in their backyard where a person lives in it, but I don't find it. I'm not objected to it.
I don't find it objectionable as long as it's planned for, and there's certain standards and criteria to avoid the most major objections that are usually raised, parking being one of them.
Yeah, for sure.
I think parking is one of the biggest issues with any of this type of stuff that we're talking about here, but that can be dealt with. I think as far as a detached unit or a separate unit, where that comes down to is that it essentially feels like you're increasing the density of a neighborhood, and that's a tough thing for a lot of people to get comfortable with, is increasing the density of it. I feel like, the ADUs that are already part of the primary structure, we already have a bunch of those around the city. I know about it. I know that we do. And so, we could do this and help to satisfy some of this requirement here. Honestly, I don't feel like it would make that big of an impact or big of a change to the city, because we're already doing it. They're all illicit at this point. So let's just kind of legitimize it, kill two birds with one stone, and I don't think it'd change that much.
Yeah, I'm really racking
In
my
practice,
head, Corey. I'm sure I was on that commission that you're talking about, and I don't recall there being a huge discussion between attached and detached. Although I suppose the likelihood that somebody would do an attached ADU versus an unattached ADU is less likely. So maybe that went to the density concern. Like, we'll allow it if it's attached because we don't think very many people are going to do it, versus the other. I personally, I don't remember what I said before or not, so I don't know if I'm flip-flopping, but I personally don't have a problem with an unattached ADU.
I'll just jump in here as well. So the ADU, I think most of us would be interested in exploring. The one that I'm second most interested in exploring is the infill overlay. The rationale in my mind, goes that as we have our kids grow up and want to move to Centerville, housing prices feel a lot of pressure, and to the small extent that we can take pressure off a little bit by getting infill, I'm comfortable with. So I'd like to look at 3 personally.
The infill overlay or the small lot floating regulation?
Number 3, the infill overlay.
Okay. Sorry, mine's listed as, well, maybe you summarized them somewhere else.
I'm looking at the planning staff recommendation 1 through 4 in green.
Oh, got it. Sorry, I was looking at, no, I would be supportive of that as well. I actually didn't mind all of them that Corey tossed out, for what it's worth. I think they're all worth exploring.
I like Kevin's point. I mean, is a consideration for the commission. It's tricky because we have zoning in place for specific purposes. And then if you allow ADUs, is it a quasi rezone for greater density? And the answer is, yeah, it is. So it is definitely tricky, because people will think, well, it's zoned RL, and all of a sudden they put an ADU in, and now it's not certainly significantly more dense, but it's twice as dense in terms of potential parking and persons.
Yeah, I agree with you, Spencer, but I think that, honestly, I think number 1, especially an attached ADU, is probably the easiest way, that would have the least, in my mind, and I could be completely wrong, I could be way off, but it would have the least resistance, partly because, like I said, it already happens. It's already going on in the city. And by approving it, it's not like we're going to see a major change, because the change has already happened.
Does anyone want to make a pitch for the small lot floating regulations, or adopting inclusionary zoning strategies?
So I'll do the pitch for small lot floating regulations. I think it has a pretty limited application. It's going to be very site specific, very fact specific. I'm comfortable with it. It's not that big a deal to me. It's just a question of whether or not we want to spend the time and resources of staff on it. If staff is comfortable proposing something, I'd be more than happy to consider it.
Well, we
Yeah.
don't have to adopt all three, right? I mean, like Corey said, we could just adopt one. The goal is not to solve the problem, but just sort of to advance the ball.
Agreed.
I know we have a lot of things on our plate, so I want to be sensitive to staff's time as well.
That's sort of what I was thinking as well. It's nice to have a toolbox, but I don't want to overcomplicate things either.
If Becky were here, she would make a pitch for the inclusionary zoning, just to throw that out there.
I think that is probably, of the four options that Corey put out, the least likely to be received council well.
And I agree
So-
with Mason. Sorry, number 4. I don't think that is very popular. I don't know how many lots would be. I know my lot, I would be interested, but I don't know how many lots are.
Did we lose her? Whoops.
She's definitely frozen on my screen.
Oh, that makes me feel better. At my house, the internet is always wonky. And so it was the one night tonight being at my works with my Wi-Fi that I knew my Wi-Fi would just be stellar. The whole meeting, I didn't have to worry about it. Well, I don't mean to cut Christina off, but I think that I would be inclined to recommend, just because I think you're right, Mason, with regard to the small lot floating regulations, that one probably has the least bang for our buck in terms of timing. And so if we're looking at having staff focus on any of these, I would be in favor of focusing on the ADUs and the infill overlay.
I can support that.
We have two. Anybody else want to jump on?
Yeah, I would say 1, 2, and 3.
And I'd say 1 and 3.
Yeah, I think consensus, Corey, is 1 and 3 for sure, and 2 if you have time.
Yeah, what I would do is just take 1, 2, and 3 and then kind of fill those out with what we're trying to accomplish. We're not creating the ordinance. We're just trying to define the parameters of a future ordinance so that future planning, one thing that's going to arrive to the council is once it's in the general plan, be comfortable to live with it. So if we put something like this in a general plan, we need to set those parameters so that when somebody comes in for a proposal or we get to a work proposal, we know the parameters we're working off of to accomplish that goal.
Great. Do you need any more direction from the Planning Commission?
No, I just wanted to find out where the commission as a whole landed, and I'll bring back some language for the transportation element. And then that language would set the parameters that we'd operate from in a future zoning tool.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for doing that, Corey. I appreciate the thought that went into suggesting those ideas. So thank you. Next up on our agenda is the Community Development Director's Report.
You have another meeting.
Woo!
What does it say? I forget already.
So City Council, nothing to report, but there's a lot of stuff here for our next meeting, it looks like.
I assume you can see that. So we have, the Hive development. I shouldn't forget that. I've been writing on the report all day long. The Hive development is coming in with an alternative. They are going to propose a rezone and PDO request. The rezone is to take a portion of the property to commercial and leave the remaining portion of the property in the RH zone. So that'll come before you for discussion. So think of it as a creative way to do a mixed use development. So that'll come in your next meeting. We met with Extreme Auto this morning. We have canceled the meeting with them because of some of the ability to get electricity for him and to get onto our DRC meetings, but he would like to come in with his final site plan. And Summerhill Lane subdivision, if you recall, the DeVore property / Symphony Homes property, they have tabled action on their project. They spent a considerable amount of time working with surrounding property owners to look at some future options, including even the school district. So you'll see some adjustments to their plan. And then we'll bring back the continued transportation element. I did put the 2 at least working goals that are underway. I've not got back to you residential buffering because I've kind of, after our last discussion, I realized it's not simple. And so I kind of put that a little bit on the back burner, get this transportation element going, and I'll come back to you with the residential buffering by the end of year. So have a meeting, and that's glad that you could do this emergency meeting on a Monday.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Corey. Last up on our agenda is just to approve our meeting minutes from August 26th. So we'll do this in the usual course, page by page. If anyone has any comments, let me know. Starting with page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. And page 6. Seeing no changes, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the minutes of the August 26th Planning Commission meeting unamended.
Second.
I moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Okay, that's it, guys. It's good to see all of your faces. I feel like every time I turn around this year, it's some new disaster, right? I mean, I never know what the next month is going to bring. So I look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday.
Cross your fingers, knock on wood.
Cross your fingers, knock on wood. Hey, I have the ability to share screen too. So when we're done, if you want to see something stupid that my son did, I'm happy to share with y'all, but we don't need to do it on public. But with that, I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Second. Oh, Spencer took it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll wait until it goes off live. My son is